All right, let's talk about something that I'm sure has driven you crazy if you've ever used Redux. You're building an app, it's going great, and then you try to fetch data from an API, and boom! The whole thing just crashes and burns. It's a classic, super frustrating mystery, and today we're going to crack this case wide open.
So this is the big question, right? Why does this powerful state management tool that we all rely on just seem to fall apart the second we ask it to do something as normal as an API call? You'd think it would just work, but there's actually a fundamental conflict happening under the hood.
And here it is. Here's the crime scene. A user clicks Login. You fire off a Redux action, and your state instantly updates to logged in, just like you told it to. But the app crashes. Why? Because the actual user data you were expecting from the server hasn't arrived yet. See, Redux is synchronous. It wants everything to happen right now. The internet, well, it doesn't work that way. That timing mismatch is the villain of our story.
So to fix this, we need to hire some help. We need a middleman, someone who can stand between our action and our reducer and manage the timing. And that brings us to our first big idea, the Middleware Gatekeeper. I want you to think of your Redux store like it's the most exclusive club in town. Before any action can get inside and start changing the state, it has to get past the bouncer at the front door. This bouncer, this gatekeeper, that's our middleware. Absolutely nothing gets past it without its approval.
So let's put a more official name on our bouncer. Middleware is really just a piece of code. It sits right in between your action and your reducer, and its entire job is to intercept every single action before it ever gets a chance to touch your state. This gives us a super important moment where we can, well, do whatever we want.
So what can this bouncer actually do? Well, it has a few moves. It can just log the action, take its name for the records like Redux Logger does. It can also just stop an action right in its tracks. Sorry, you're not on the list. Or, and this is the one we care about, it can delay the action. It can tell the action, hey, you need to wait here for a minute until this API call comes back. That delay power is our secret weapon.
Now, the specific kind of middleware that has mastered this delay tactic, well, it has a kind of weird name, but trust me, it is incredibly powerful. It's time to talk about the Thunk.
The word thunk sounds way more complicated than it actually is. Seriously, don't let the name freak you out. In programming, it's just a fancy term for a function that gets returned by another function. That's it. That's the whole definition. Okay, so here's what that actually looks like in your code. A normal, standard Redux action creator is simple. You call it, and it immediately returns a plain old object. But a Thunk action creator, you call it, and it returns a function. That tiny difference, returning a function instead of an object, is the entire magic trick. So why is returning a function so powerful? Because that function is like our own little time machine. Inside of it, we can hit pause, we can kick off our API fetch request, and just wait. We wait for the response to come back from the server. And only when we have the data in our hands do we then dispatch the real action object to the reducer. The Thunk is what finally lets Redux learn how to wait.
Now, understanding the theory is awesome, but let's be real. You don't want to be building all this stuff from scratch anymore, right? Thankfully, modern tools have made this whole process way easier. And that brings us to the modern solution, Redux Toolkit.
Seriously, if you're working in a modern React app, you should absolutely be using Redux Toolkit. And tucked inside that toolkit is this beautiful little helper called createAsyncThunk. It basically handles all the boring setup for you and gives you this clean, powerful way to manage your async logic.
And the best part about createAsyncThunk is that it just gets it. It knows that any API call really has three possible stages. There's the pending state, that's when you're waiting. There's fulfilled, that's the success case when you get your data. And there's rejected for when things go wrong. It automatically creates actions for all three of these states for you. No extra work.
All right, let's look at some code. Step 1 is you define the thunk itself. You call createAsyncThunk. You give it a unique name like user/fetch-by-ID, and then you give it an async function. This is where you put your actual API call, your fetch request. Whatever this async function returns, that becomes the data, the payload of your fulfilled action.
Okay, step 2. Now we need to listen for those automatic actions. Inside your Redux slice, you use this thing called extra reducers. And here you can add a case for fetch users.pending. When that pending action fires, you can update your state to say, hey, I'm loading now, and maybe show a spinner in your UI.
Next up, we listen for the happy path fetch users fulfilled. This case gets the action, and the data we return from our API call is sitting right there, inside of action.payload. Now we can safely take that data and put it in our state. The app doesn't crash because we waited. It's beautiful.
And of course, we have to handle when things go wrong. We add one more case for fetch users rejected. If the API fails for any reason, this listener catches it. Now you can update your state to show an error message to the user. And just like that, you have a complete, super robust system for handling asynchronous code.
Okay, that was a lot, so let's boil it all down. If you're going to remember just a few things from all this, what should they be? Let's hit the big takeaways.
First, just remember, middleware is the bouncer at the club door, and it intercepts every single action. Second, a thunk is just a special kind of middleware that lets us dispatch functions instead of objects. And third, that one simple trick is what gives Redux the superpower to finally pause and wait for things like API calls to finish.
You know, there's a way of thinking about this that I think just nails it. Without a tool like Thunk, Redux is really just a synchronous calculator. It's great for UI state, but that's about it. But when you add Thunk, you transform it into a real, powerful data-fetching engine for your entire application. It's a total game changer.
And there you have it. The mystery is solved. Redux doesn't have to crash. By understanding and using async middleware, you've totally unlocked its full potential. So the only question left is, now that you know how to make Redux wait, what incredible things are you going to build?